Last time the Clemson Tigers ventured up to Notre Dame Stadium, it was a pretty good outing for one DJ Uiagalelei, but in the end, Notre Dame pulled out an overtime win. We'll see what we got going this trip for the Tigers going to South Bend. We got Brian Driscoll on the line from Irish Breakdown. We always rely on Brian for the best in Notre Dame coverage. You should as well. It's Irish Breakdown. That's your destination. Brian, how you doing today?
Doing great. Busy, ready for another big game. Hopefully Notre Dame can keep winning, but yeah, it's doing well. It's November college football, Mark. It doesn't get any better than this.
No doubt about that. And I'm guessing that you would be okay with another pick six to start this game.
Yes. Yeah. If Jack Kaiser or J.D. Bertrand can take the ball from the running back like Jeremiah Usakorm and run it back for a touchdown, and then to make it even better on the very next series, strip the ball on third down from a receiver and set your offense up for another score. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that, certainly. Yeah.
We usually start with offense, but let's start with the defense. We're already there. Garrett Schrader ran for 2 yards. Now, I know that there was some sack yardage included, but that guy tears up just about everybody. Has been somebody that with Sean Tucker getting so much attention has been the focal point of the Syracuse offense. And Notre Dame, first and foremost, that was my takeaway, is that they took that away from the Orange.
Well, it was huge because that's something Notre Dame has not been very good at this year. I mean, I think they came into that game with 1 turnover the entire season, which is still just nutty. So I think the fact that not only did you go on the road against a good team, the crowd was really loud. It was a big game for them. I mean, this is a huge game for Syracuse. You not only quiet the crowd, but I think it gave them a little extra spark because it's something they haven't really done this season. And I think Garrett Schrader came to that game a little, I don't say rattled. That's not he was beat up against Clemson. He missed some time during the week of practice, and I think something like that just kind of sent him on a downward trajectory where he wasn't the same kid the rest of the game. Even if you just watch him try and tackle Brandon Joseph on that play, it's like he didn't know what happened, and I think that kind of thing. And I think it also gave Notre Dame a lot of confidence because Notre Dame's a reeling football team, Mark. I mean, they are. I mean, they're just trying to bounce back from a loss to Stanford and all that. I think they needed that confidence boost. And then after that, you started seeing Notre Dame play like the team that we all thought, well, at least I thought that they were going to be coming into the season.
Well, Brian, I'm sure you've gotten the memo by now. Now that Notre Dame has defeated Syracuse, well, Syracuse is no good. That's why Notre Dame beat them. That's how we play that game now with the rankings. Well, they can't be any good because So how do you and I will preface this by saying when I went through my top 25 rankings this week, I started to count up the 5-3 and 6-2 teams in college football. There are 42 of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot to weed through there. Notre Dame would have one of the more capable schedules out there amongst those 6-2, 5-3 teams. So how do we corroborate the team that beat North Carolina by 3 scores, who's turning out to be a pretty damn good football team, and obviously Drake May is a superstar, and then the Syracuse performance versus that Stanford pitfall in the middle?
And that's the thing with Notre Dame. We were talking earlier on our show, Mark, and I've said I would contend that Notre Dame's 2 best games this year, North Carolina and Syracuse, they were more impressive than Clemson has been in any single game they've played this year. The problem is Clemson's just been a really steady football team all year. They're not the dominant 2018 team or the 2016 or 2015 team. They're just a steadily good football team. Notre Dame has been, 1 week they go to toe-to-toe with Ohio State. The next week they're losing to Marshall. They barely beat a mediocre Cal team at home. The next week go smash North Carolina on the road. Beat BYU more convincingly than the final score showed. Then you come home and you lose to a bad Stanford team. And then you go on the road and beat a pretty good Syracuse team. I can't figure this team out. And I think that's been the frustrating thing is because, you look at the rankings that come out last night and, I'm going through the rankings and I'm putting all the numbers together to give my opinion. And, there's 4 teams in the top 25 that have 2 wins over other ranked opponents based on who's ranked now. It's Tennessee has 2, Clemson has 3, TCU has 2, and Utah has 2. Notre Dame also has 2. And I think that's the frustrating thing is how do you do that? And then one of your losses is a game to the number 2 team that you led for 33 minutes of that game, and then yet you lost at home to Marshall and Stanford. I think that's been the maddening thing about Notre Dame, and what makes them hard to predict is if they play their game, they absolutely can beat Clemson this weekend. But if they play like they have at home every other game this year, Clemson will smack them. And that's just the great unknown about this football team. I kind of know who Clemson's going to be on Saturday because they've just been that team every week. And that's, it's a credit to that staff. Notre Dame, you just no clue what you're going to get from week to week.
Brian, we don't have you on here to throw up your hands and say, I don't know what to make of this team. You're supposed to have the answers.
I've been trying to figure it out, but I do think, however, the last couple games, we're starting to see a version of Notre Dame that we hadn't seen in a while. And it's not so much an execution thing, because a lot of the stuff that we saw against Syracuse is stuff that's hurt them all year. Your red zone defense is literally yet to make a stop all year. You have a turnover on offense. You're still giving up too many big plays and all the stuff. You're not throwing the football. The reason you're able to still beat Syracuse convincingly is because we finally saw Notre Dame start to exert their will on their opponent physically in a way that we haven't really seen as much all year. They didn't bully a Stanford team that was waiting to be bullied, that like we saw UCLA do to them. They were a team that did not play with a great deal of confidence. What I think has happened is, after Syracuse, talking to several sources, Marcus Freeman had a sit down with his coordinators, and it was like, look, these kids are thinking too much. We're putting too much on their plates. I've talked to sources that have said the play sheets for the offense and defense this year are significantly bigger than they were last year. And I think Coach Freeman stepped in and said, it's going to be less of that and more of, let's let these kids go play confidently and play fast. And you started to see a little bit of that against UNLV. They came out and just jumped all over UNLV. It's 30-7 at halftime, 23-17 in the first quarter. And then against Syracuse, we saw it take a next step. So it wasn't so much, they didn't clean up their play as, a ton. It's not like they played a perfect game. Still had a lot of mistakes. But they finally played with the speed and the confidence and the physicality that we thought we were going to get from this team coming into the season.
And that's one thing of many that I remember catching from you and the guys when I broke in on one of your podcasts here recently, one of your live streams, I think, just talking about guys finally playing freer in certain positions, especially in the defensive side, some linebackers that finally get it because they hadn't been showing the speed that they have because they're thinking too much and trying to dissect too much, that they haven't been able to instinctively read it and go.
Well, we're watching Syracuse. You hear this thing, Notre Dame doesn't have speed. And I'm like, well, I can understand why you would think that if you're not a team if you're not someone that just watches practice and games and has watched this team every single snap they've played for the last, however many years like I have. I would understand why people who just watch Notre Dame occasionally would think that, because like you said, they don't play loose, they don't play free. Last week we saw, okay, that's why you guys thought Maris Luafau was a good player. That's why they love J.D. Bertrand so much. I mean, Syracuse has one of the best running backs in the country, and on back-to-back snaps, I'm watching Notre Dame's 6'5", 265-pound defensive end open up and run with him on wheel routes, right? Like when their 6'5", 265 DN can run with your all-American caliber running back, what are you supposed to do? Right. And so we finally saw Brandon Joseph look like the kid he was a couple years ago with a couple picks in the game, and you start to say, okay, this is what we thought Notre Dame was going to be. They coming into the game, it was Syracuse's defensive team speed that people were worried about, right? Because they got a lot of team speed. But in reality, it was Notre Dame's team speed on defense that allowed them to carry the day on that side of the ball. And that's what we thought they were going to be. Now, the offense still hasn't figured it out yet from a skill standpoint, but the defense is finally starting to figure it out because, as you said, less thinking, more reacting, and let's make it be more about our guys versus their guys and not so much about how smart we are compared to how smart the other team's coaches are, because we got better players than they do. Let's let them go play. That's I think the mindset that's Notre Dame staff is starting to take, and I think that's why their play has been better the last couple of weeks.
Folks, if you're not familiar, it's irishbreakdown.com. Get there for the best in Notre Dame football coverage. Brian Driscoll, the reason we have him on is because exactly what you're hearing. He knows what he's talking about, not just concerning Notre Dame, but any opponent, anything across the country. He's a coach and he knows what's going on. He knows football. He knows Notre Dame personnel and history.